Travis Reier and Charlie Potter of the BamaOnline.com staff from Coleman Coliseum, Charlie. No signs of basketball in here, but we are going to talk some football as just across the street inside the Hank Crisp Indoor Facility, the Alabama Crimson Tide taking part in day 12 of 2015 fall camp. And Charlie, I guess we got kind of the idea, the difference between a minor injury and several days, because I think it's more towards the latter than the former, because we saw not only Jacob Coker back at practice, but it looked like he was moving around pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, he was off to the side with head trainer Jeff Allen, and they were working with a medicine ball. He was doing a lot of like one-legged, just like footwork drills, nothing too strenuous, but the fact that he was out there after Saban said he'd be out for several days is a good sign. And he was in full pads. I mean, it's tough to tell because the quarterbacks always wear the black jerseys, but I mean, he looked to be moving fine. We didn't see him run or anything.
No bike or anything like that.
You couldn't tell a limp in what he was doing, so that was a good sign.
And he looked like he was pushing off pretty well, throwing and landing on that foot pretty well in terms of throwing it around a little bit with Jeff Allen. But you're right. Once we leave, it's up in the air as to how much he'll do. But I would say it bodes well for him in trying to stay in this thing, if not win it. Based on what we saw today, it doesn't look like it's a several days issue.
Right.
Will he be able to scrimmage Saturday? That's the big question, I would say, at this point.
Yeah, I mean, that's what it all comes down to, because basically this scrimmage is how Blake Sims won the job last year. I mean, that it kind of came down to the wire, and this is where it all changed. And I mean, you can tell just these guys that are behind Coker, they're ready to step up. Today was really no difference in the lines that we saw. It was basically seniority again. They did kind of break up and do a little bit of combo routes where they'd have a guy dump off into the flats and then a guy run a corner, and it was Alec Morris and David Cornwell up front, and that breaks the seniority trend. And that's not all too surprising. Those are the two guys you would think would be up there, just from the standpoint of what we've seen so far. But outside of that, nothing really telling from practice.
We saw a lot of easy throws.
Yeah.
Is what we saw. We saw them in individual periods work on swings with wide receivers in motion across the formation, both behind the quarterback and sort of underneath on a waggle action off play. I think that's what we're going to see a lot of this year. I think that's what they'd like to do, obviously, with a new quarterback. That smoke screen throw that Blake Sims got really good at with Amari Cooper last year, the quick throw to the flat, and what we've seen of that at the open practice, I think that may be the toughest throw that they have to make. Yeah. And it's the scariest throw, I think, for some of them that aren't exactly quick getting the ball out and maybe a little inaccurate. That's one, if you're not really precise, it's harder than it looks. And if you're not precise, you could have a pick six going the other way. So be interesting to see how they come along from that standpoint defensively. In the secondary, a little something to note, I thought, today.
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, it was the same. Cyrus Jones is holding down that right corner spot, which is no surprise. I mean, unless, knock on wood, something happens to him from an injury standpoint, that's not going to change. But Marlon Humphrey was opposite him, which was a little odd to see. I don't know if that shoulder is affecting Tony a little more or what's happening to Anthony Averett, but apparently Marlon's back from his pulled muscle, and he was out there with the first team. And then we had the same guys out there with Gino and Eddie as the safeties, and then it was tough to tell because they're doing a lot of moving around, but the extra DBs, Star and Money, were either Maurice Smith and Mika Fitzpatrick, and Mika's up there again. And then Ruben was in the middle. I mean, most of it was what we've seen before. Marlon was definitely a surprise.
They worked sort of I would say a nickel front, maybe down on the other end with the defensive line and a couple of the inside linebackers. And as you would expect, Jaron Reed, Ashawn Robinson, sort of at the two techniques, head up the guards, which they've done plenty of. Jonathan Allen outside at an end. Denzel Duvall on the other side. They keep trying to get rid of Denzel Duvall, but he's not having it at this point. So a few interesting things on the defensive side. Anything else from an injury standpoint or a note that you want to put out there?
One thing I did notice was he had looked fine before, and he didn't look like anything was troubling today, but Robert Foster was at the back of one of the receiver lines that he usually leads. And surprisingly enough, at the front of that line was Calvin Ridley. And I mean, he showed off his speed in some of those intermediate routes that we saw. And that's just something that kind of stood out today.
You watch Ridley, there's an enthusiasm to him.
Yeah.
He has some bounce.
Yeah.
And now he's a young player. You come in here as a true freshman, you're you stay excited a little longer than the veterans do about camp. But he's sort of like that young buck. He's got a crispness to him and a bounce that, you're right, is fun to watch. And Dalen Charlotte, I think he had a hamstring support on for a day or two. That's gone. Those things come and go, so we see a lot of those. But yeah, I think otherwise we're in pretty good shape here, and we'll do this again on Wednesday.
School starts back.
Classes start tomorrow. I think a lot of these guys are glad this is it for fall camp. 20-hour-a-week rule goes into effect with the start of classes, so they catch a little bit of a break. I don't know if any of these guys have ever been as enthusiastic about school starting than they probably are right now.
Probably.
So for Charlie Potter, I'm Travis Reier, reminding you to keep it right here on BamaOnline.com for more coverage of preseason 2015 as we transition from fall camp to classes and normal practice schedule.